Back again with more Frostheart today. We read the first chapter yesterday and it had finished with Ash and his friend Rice just escaping the lurkers when the hunters had come to save them. So let's see what happens next. Chapter 2, A Rude Awakening. Songweaver. The name had flashed through Ash's mind like an accusation in the moment he blacked out, and now he turned over and over in his head, dimly aware that someone, no doubt Tobu, seemed to be gently carrying him home. The term was like a shadow, following him wherever he went, and Ash didn't even know what it meant. He just knew it was bad news. Truth be told, Tobu was just the latest in a long line of reluctant guardians who'd been tasked with looking after Ash since his parents had disappeared. His parents had been pathfinders, a fact that filled Ash with both pride and sadness. Pathfinders were fearless traders and also the last hope of human kin, a final effort to connect the scattered strongholds in some sort of unified civilization. Only a few years after he had been born, Ash's parents had set off aboard their sleigh, the Trailblazer, leaving him in Alderman Kindle's care, as they had so many times before. It was the last the Fira ever saw of them, and so began Ash's time being fostered by the stronghold. Before Tobu, he had been living with Char and her family, and it had all been going fairly well, right up until he'd sung. Songweaver. Ash knew he shouldn't have. The Fira was so scared of singing, of songweavers, whatever they were, that music was forbidden in the stronghold, and there had already been rumours going around about who Ash was, what he was. But he had done it anyway. In Ash's defence, he had only sung a lullaby, the lullaby his parents had used to sing to him before they left. Ash couldn't help singing it to himself, as much as he tried. The urge came so often, he rarely realised he was even doing it. Ash would sing it for comfort, to feel like his parents were still around. It was almost all he had left of them after all. He would hum it quietly to himself when he pulled on his animal hide tunic and fur cloak in the chill mornings. He'd sing it under his breath while at lessons, learning to hunt, practicing archery and hunter sign language, though he would clap his hands over his mouth when he became aware of the fierce looks that other villagers were giving him. He would roll the few words he remembered through his head at night, a warming blanket of memory to send him to sleep. It was innocent, it was harmless. But that wasn't a good enough excuse. Not for his guardian Char, at least, who had whipped Ash right out of his bed and taken him to Alderman Kindle's stone lodge in the dead of night. "He was singing," she'd whispered, her voice strained with fear. I wasn't," Ash had squeaked in a very small voice. It was a lie, but it was all he could think of to say. "I can't do it, Alderman," Char had said. "I have children of my own to think of. I can't risk it. My home is no place for a—" Char's eyes darted from side to side as though she was afraid to say it. A songweaver. The hairs on the back of Ash's neck had prickled. That name again. Ash had stood beside his guardian before the large wooden doors of the Alderman's lodge. Warm, inviting light spilled out through the opening the Alderman stood in, but he made no motions to invite them in. "I am no coward," Char continued, though she had certainly looked scared, "but I am no fool either. The Leviathan attacks are getting worse. Every winter that passes, they get more hostile, and we lose more of our people. You can barely hear yourself think for their singing these days, and the boy sings more and more too, just like them. They hate us, and they'll use the boy for evil. You mark my words. I'm sorry, but he can't stay with me." Alderman Kindle, the large, imposing hunter leader of the Fira people, had let out a long sigh. He looked tired. While he might have had shoulders as wide as a sleigh, his beard was touched by grey, and wrinkle lines etched his face, creasing his many scars. The air of wisdom and strength he carried was only slightly ruined by the big, fluffy slippers he was wearing. Ash had felt like his heart was in a terrible, painful grip. The tears were becoming harder and harder to hold back. Moved on again. Seeing his expression, Char had reached out as if to hold him, to comfort him, like she had used to, but she had hesitated before pulling her hand away. "I am sorry, Ash. Truly." Kindle had scratched his head, thinking, although he has broken Fira law, I can't imagine his singing was anything more than some childish rhyme he's made up. Ash had gazed up at the Alderman with hope, but met with a look that suggested he was still far from off the hook. "As much as it pains me, I clearly cannot persuade you to look after the boy, but it is the duty of the Fira people to care for Ash. If you will not look after the child, we must find someone who will." Ash's face had flushed red with shame. He knew the Alderman was running out of options. He had gazed at the still, empty village round him. Passing pathfinders considered it to be a small stronghold compared to those further south, and Ash guessed that must have been true. But it was the only stronghold he had ever known. It consisted of 50 or so stone dwellings that surrounded the Alderman's central lodge like a protective elk herd. all nestled behind the high stone walls, sat upon a snow-covered cliff that raised the stronghold from the dangerous snows below. Tall watchtowers stood at each corner, connected to the walls by bridges made of stone or ice, stoic sentinels that guarded against a hidden enemy that threatened them all. The stronghold also had a tannery and a sleigh dock, which was empty more often than not, but that was pretty much it. Everyone knew everyone, and they did what they could to help one another. You had to when you practically lived on top of each other and were cut off from everyone else in the known world. Ash had spotted a giant walking close by, carrying a large oak carcass over its shoulders, as though it were nothing but a sack of red root. The figure had snow-white fur, a long tail, and was clad in ornate armour, a spear slung over its muscular back. It was Tobu, the mysterious Yeti outsider. All Ash knew about him was that he'd been cast out from the Yeti lands in the world's Spine Mountains years ago, and had been accepted into the Fear stronghold before Ash had been born. Yeti were rarely seen outside their own lands, and were rightfully respected as powerful warriors. Even Alderman Kindle had to look up at him, and Kindle was the biggest man in the stronghold by far. Ash was scared of Tobu. Most of the Fearer were. Kindle must have spotted Tobu too, and the next thing Ash knew, he was hailing the beast. Tobu, Kindle called. A word, please. Tobu looked surprised, but strode over and grunted a greeting, his white fur matted with the blood of the ulk he was carrying. Tobu, the alderman began, you were a valuable member of our stronghold, a staunch defender of our walls, and an unsurpassed hunter. We are happy to have you. Tobu seemed a little taken aback at the compliments, but nodded his thanks. He was a Yeti of very few words. You will remember that you swore an oath to do whatever the stronghold required of you in return for sanctuary within our walls. I remember, Tobu had said. For a creature so large, he had a very quiet voice. This made him all the scarier to Ash, who took a step away. Well, the Fearer have great need of you now. This boy, Ash, needs a guardian to raise him, to protect him, to turn him into a strong Fearer hunter. I'm delighted to announce that this guardian, Tobu, is now you. Ash's heart felt like it had stopped. Tobu dropped the old carcass, which fell to the snow with a sickening thwump. The Yeti flexed his considerable muscles, balled his huge fists, and gritted his fangs, taking in a deep breath. Even Char looked like she might intervene. No, Ash thought in desperation. This can't be. Anyone but him. Please! He'll have me for his dinner. I don't want to become boiled boy broth. I must object. Tobu's deep voice rumbled, holding up his blood-soaked hands in protest. I'm no child carer. It is... The Yeti looked at Ash with distaste. Ash, careful not to make eye contact. It is a task that I'm not equipped for. But Alderman Kindle was having none of it. Now, he said, raising his hand. We have taken you in, Tobu. We have given you a home, safe from the terrors of the wilds, and in return, this is what you must do, Fez. I thought a Yeti's oath was as immovable as the mountains from which they hail. A low growl came from deep within Tobu's chest. He breathed hard, his nostrils flaring, but finally he relented, giving a small nod. It is so. Excellent, the alderman cheered, but Ash had thought it anything but. And over the next month, Ash had become quite familiar with that feeling. Tobu's drafty watchtower home lay on the outskirts of the village, just beyond the stronghold's eastern wall, the small space they shared filled with the strong, bestial, tangy scent of the Yeti. It was cold and lonely out there, away from the village fires, with only a long, narrow bridge of ice connecting the tower to the rest of the stronghold. All Fearer children were trained in the arts of survival, but Tobu trained Ash harder than anyone else in the stronghold, and he made it quite clear how he felt Ash's progress was going. I have seen rocks with more agility than you, he had said. Indeed, the morning of the fateful lurker attack had started like any other, with Tobu shaking Ash awake at the crack of dawn, violently swinging his hammock to and fro. So early, Ash had groaned, squinting at the cooing pigeons who lived in the rafters of the tower. Tobu grunted. Let us hope it is not too late to make you into a hunter. Tobu had been as keen as ever to fit in a training session before breakfast. Breakfast was perhaps a bit of a strong word. It was more of a collection of roots Tobu had gathered, still dirty and unwashed from the wilds, including red root, Ash had noticed, pulling a face. Ash hated red root. It was the favourite fruit of the Fearer people, who respected strength and perseverance above all else. Like them, the red root was tough, and it required great great amounts of strength and perseverance to chew the stupid thing. And just like the flames that the Fira worshipped, the red root was hot and spicy as placing a burning torch in your mouth. Passing pathfinders would trade the Fira furs and fabrics for it, but always with slight reluctance. I don't really like red root, Ash had said. He wouldn't normally complain, but Ash felt like he needed to make a stand against at least one of the bad things that was happening in his life, even if it was just his breakfast. Thought all Fira liked red root, Toby would replied. I don't think I am Fira, not anymore. Ever since he'd been chucked out of Charles' dwelling, the villagers had given Ash a wide berth, whispering what he'd done as he passed. They avoided making eye contact with him, and if they did, their smiles would quickly disappear. Ash had become used to this, but it didn't stop him feeling like he had a stone in his stomach. I don't even know what I've done wrong, he would think to himself. It can't just be my singing, can it? I know I've broken the taboo, but it was just a lullaby. I've never hurt anybody. Don't eat it then, Toby had said, picking up a wooden stool that seemed no bigger than his giant hand. He laid it down carefully and managed to almost delicately balance his considerate bulk on the seat, the stool's wooden legs creaking and straining. He tucked into his own red root. With grim satisfaction, Ash noticed a spice-induced tear well up in one of Toby's eyes. Ash had tried to take a bite from his root, but the ruddy thing was so tough he had to gnash and gnaw it in till he finally succeeded in ripping a bit off, his hand slamming painfully on the table with a sudden relief. He had held his throbbing hand, looking down at his plate and breathing hard. I have told you before, Toby noted. You must practice patience and perseverance, boy. You must. Why did you leave your clan? Ash interrupted, deflecting another lecture. Toby was very fond of them, but Toby said nothing. He crunched through his root. Ash tried again. What are the Yeti clans like? Eat, Toby answered, furrowing his brows. Ash gulped down a piece of the root he'd been chewing for at least 10 minutes. He took another bite and winced. So, Toby wasn't in the mood for chatting then. No surprise there. After they had choked down breakfast and Ash had floundered his way through another lacklustre morning training session, it had been time to join the other children of the stronghold for yet more delightful training. Toby and Ash had walked into the village together, as Toby was going to join the daily hunt for food and supplies vital to keeping the stronghold alive. As they parted, Toby had given Ash what was clearly meant to be an encouraging push to send him on his way, but instead sent him flying. Ash could have sworn he saw the closest thing to a glimmer of humour he'd ever seen in Toby's eyes. I'm sorry, Ash. It is easy to forget just how light and frail you are. I will do better to remember. Hurry up there, young Ash, called out the cracked elderly voice of his teacher, Lightbringer Hayes, who stood close by with the other giggling Fira children. 'Tis no time to be lounging in the snow. You have a lesson to attend. Yes, yes, indeed. Lightbringers, the clerics who spoke with the fire spirits, were responsible for keeping the flames of the stronghold alight, which was sometimes the only light the village had in the dark, cold north of the Snow Sea. They were also charged with bringing the light of knowledge to the stronghold's children. Now gather round, children. If you blizzard babies don't want to end up as monster food, I suggest you clean out your ears and listen good to what I tell you. Yes, indeed, declared Hayes as Ash joined the rest of the class atop the southern wall. The old man leaned on his staff, sunstone shards hanging from his furs like glowing amber rain. He nodded at his own wisdoms, flecks of spittle glinting his beard. To be a hunter, to leave the safety of our walls, is to face near certain death. The children gulped as one. As you all know, there is no greater enemy to the human kin of the scattered strongholds than the Leviathians, lurkers, hurtlers, no matter their type, they're all deadlier than starvation, worse than any wraith raid. Yes, more deadly even than the freezing fury of the ice, Crone herself. Hayes gestured dramatically at the barren snow plains around her. The ravenous beasts hide under the snows, always watching, indeed always waiting, ready for another brave or foolish enough to set foot upon the snows. To survive such a threat, you must learn the tried and proven secrets of the Fira hunters, passed down for generations, indeed. As he spoke, the Lightbringer paced in front of the class, his chin frantic in motion, as his mouth pulled up a line of drool that had tried to get away. Ash stood behind Rice, Shine and Flare, the only children in the stronghold who didn't seem to believe that he might be a song weaver. They were the closest thing he had to friends, and they were all doing an outstanding job of avoiding eye contact with Hayes in case he asked them a question. Suddenly one of the children called out in alarm, pointing over the side of the battlements. Lightbringer! What's that? The snow below had been disturbed. Something was moving underneath it. "Aha! What did I tell you?" crowed Hayes. "They're here. Gather round, children, and you will see something so awful it may turn your hair as grey as mine." Ash was shoved hard as the class surged forward to get a closer look. "Out of the way, song freak," sneered Thor, a lanky, smug-looking older boy. Thor was by far Ash's least favourite person in the stronghold, followed closely by his guffering, boot-licking lackeys Rays and Frey, who stepped in line behind their leader. Ash said nothing, but got as far away from the bullies as he could before peering over the battlements. The children held their breath. All was still, all was quiet. Then, "There!" cried Hayes in his most spit-spattering whisper. Or let me try that again. "There!" cried Hayes in his most spit-spattering whisper. The snow had surged forward, leaving a trail behind it. There was something below, something that had sensed the sounds of the stronghold, perhaps the vibrations of the western gate creeping open as the Huntry party had set out. The trail moved forward, snaking towards the Fira cliff. The children gasped. Ash's throat had gone dry, his fingers gripping onto the stone wall. The trail was almost there. It was so close, and then suddenly a tiny little snow hare popped his head out from under the snow. The children let out a collective groan of disappointment. The hare dropped off to the base, over to the base of the cliff, twitching its nose. It left a few little droppings to show that the cliff did not interest it, and with a last adorable twitch of its nose, it burrowed back under the snow out of sight. Hayes cleared his throat. "Yes, well, of course, the Leviathans are unpredictable beasts, and you can't always be certain when they'll attack, but rest assured they will. Yes, indeed." Sir," one of the children said, pointing at their friend who had a bit of an accident in the heat of the moment. "Spirits above, what a mess," Hayes cursed, pulling at his beard. "This is not how you become a brave hunter. No, indeed." "Come on," Rice had hissed at the gang. "This'll take a while. Fancy a quick game of sparkball while the old man's back is turned?" The friends smiled at each other. Of course they did, and what could go wrong? As it had turned out, rather a lot. That's the end of chapter 2.